This one. No, Darcy.
Good morning, Don. Can you hear us?
This one.
Good morning.
That's not right.
How about Meeker? Can Meeker hear us?
Is it this one on this side? Push that out.
Trevor, I think that earlier, I was gonna say Trevor, I think was in the.
Oh, here he comes.
He's
We can
running.
hear you.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody there beside you?
Here it comes.
Sorry.
No one in here at the moment. I'll be in the recording room.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We will start the meeting at 9:02. This meeting will be streamed live on RBC YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in this meeting and are unable to travel to Rangeley, we will be having a virtual link to the meeting set up in Meeker at the historic courthouse located at 555 Main Street, 3rd floor, hearing room in Meeker, Colorado. So we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment period. Any member of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you're requested to limit your comments to 3 minutes per member or 5 minutes per group. The public comment time is not for questions and answers. It is your time to express your views. To ensure there is adequate public comment time, please provide your name and address prior to the meeting by contacting the board assistant at 970-878-9683. If any member of the public would like to comment at this time, please state your name and address for the record. So we will start in the room first. Is there anybody in the room for public comment time? Seeing none, is there any online? Go ahead, Wendy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is Wendy Gillard. My address is 2534 East Main Street, Rangeley, Colorado. I just had a couple of things. I wanted to just find out if the child protective team has been established. I was watching one of your meetings and you said that Zoe was the only one doing assessments. So I just wanted to see, I see Carmen's on, if that has been reestablished. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is just a time for you to make your public comments. If you want to know more specifically, maybe reach out to Carmen.
Okay. And so then I also have never gotten an answer on when the public can speak or participate in a meeting of elected officials that, according to your organizational chart, the community is at the top as we have elected you. I was kicked off when I was trying to address something on the agenda. I tried to reach out by email to just ask, like, when can the public talk about something that is on the agenda, especially if we don't know what your conversation is going to be at the beginning during public comment time. And so I would really appreciate some, I'm sorry, I'm missing the word. Can you help me out? Some
Direction.
There you go. Thank you. Some clear direction on that. That would be very helpful for me and probably very helpful for your meetings. But I do want to be an active member. I don't want to be a pain in anyone's rear end. I just want to be an active community member. And then my third thing is, I mean, just even looking at my first comment is, why don't you interact with me the same way that you do other community members during public comment? I've seen many come to you without issues from the agenda. I've seen you guys answer questions and say what you'll do or not do, or what, um, how you can help them out. When I very first came to you, the very first time you did interact with me, but now that's not happening. But when I watch other meetings, I still see you interacting with other people. And so I feel like, um, that's not consistent, and that I deserve to be treated the same way as the rest of the community. Um, is there any comments or questions on that? Is there anybody that can help me? Um, email me I feel like that's a little bit of discrimination when I'm not treated the same way as the other community members. Um, it's a pretty easy question. So, anything?
Wendy, I will follow back up with you again and make another appointment with you, and then we can talk face to face with this.
Okay.
And I'll have Vicky there as well.
And Carmen, maybe?
For now, I'll just have Vicky there.
Okay. I want you to know that I am down in Denver getting ready for my transplant. So the face-to-face will have to be virtual. Is that okay?
Yep, that works.
And then I have people to help remind me to make sure that I have it right in my calendar.
We'll send you a Google Meet.
Perfect. And I'll just let you know how it is around my appointments that I have coming up. Is that okay?
Yep, that works.
Okay, so thank you. That's
Thank
all
you,
that I
Wendy.
have.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody else online? Nope, seeing none, we'll move on to, this is a tentative agenda which includes all information available as of May 20th, 2025. The final tentative agenda will be posted at the RBC Historic Courthouse, 555 Main Street, Meeker, Colorado, and at the Rangeley Town Hall, 209 East Main Street, Rangeley. We will move on to line item D.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the agenda with the removal of resolution A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Sean, will you please call the roll?
Overton.
Aye.
Richfield. Aye. O'Hairn.
Moving on to line item 2, consent.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of the meeting minutes from May 13th and the May 23rd payroll management reports.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions from you guys? Sean, will you please call the roll?
Scritchfield. Aye. Overton.
Aye.
O'Hairn.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to line item 3, business. We will have a presentation by Elizabeth Wiley with Rangeley District Hospital regarding mental health options in Rio Blanco County. Come on up.
Okay, we sit here.
Yeah. You can come sit up here, Brittany. Thank you.
We brought you guys some swag thing.
Wow.
Thank you.
And don't know if I have enough. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but it doesn't look like that's this practical thing, right? So I printed it.
Keep one person.
Thank you. Nope, you're fine.
You want one? Sure, if there's an extra. Yep, there's the Rachel more. Well, thank you so much for having me. And, you know, your openness and desire to talk about mental health and the opportunity to share what our service providers are doing in the county. And this is in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to just go to this page, the overview, just to talk a little bit about what mental health is, and then we're going to focus on the behavioral health services in the county, and then a little bit, touch a little bit on what options beyond that might be, and how to connect people to resources. So on the next page, two of those overview pages, I apologize. So on this page, mental health, you know, I think one thing that's really helpful when we're talking about mental health is to start from the point of view of mental health is just health. We all have mental health, and it can be defined as the emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So we have physical well-being, we have mental well-being, and it affects how we feel and how we think, our cognitive processes, how we act, how we respond to stress, which is a normal part of everybody's life, our relationships, and how we make decisions. So our mental health is so integral to all these different parts of our life that are so important for quality of life and also for productivity. The next page, you know, this graphic just emphasizes the point that mental health is not the same as mental illness. And so often, you know, I'm sure we're all aware, there's a lot of stigma, even just saying the words mental health, you know, and that's something that leaders and healthcare providers and pretty much anybody can just help in talking about these things. You know, people are afraid to say mental health. And really, if we can kind of start to change that perception, you know, that's not the same as mental illness. And even if you did have a mental illness, there's nothing wrong with having an illness, right? We all experience illness at some point. And on that point, you know, in the idea of mental health, it's just health. It functions like any other part of our physical health. You know, we can have long periods or short periods of having just good mental health, good health. And then we can have short-term, we can have things that are just less severe that impact our mental health from time to time. Like if we're going through a lot of stress for whatever reason, you know, we feel it in our brains. So it can be minor issues. We could have extended challenges as a result of trauma and just how our body and brain reacts to negative circumstances. And then it can also become chronic. And that's when we get, you know, the last two are where we kind of get in the category of maybe what we would call illness. Like it could be a short-term depressive episode that could be categorized as a mental illness that is resolvable like any other illness you would have. And then there's situations that can become chronic and lifelong. So there's a real range of from really mild to more severe situations of mental illness. And, you know, the things that can cause mental illness, genetics play a factor. And, you know, they're really the same as factors that might affect your physical illness. Genetics can come into play, which is, you know, not our fault. It's just bad luck. We have genetic predispositions for weight or diabetes and other things. Trauma is a huge factor. So think of it, physical trauma like a car wreck or falling and breaking a leg. That's significant physical trauma. That, you know, other factors that affect our more emotional or mental well-being through stress or things that happen to us, those are bad circumstances. You know, also there's a luck component there, and they affect our mental health. And then, you know, just like with other things, lifestyle plays a factor too. And, you know, so we could call those bad choices, but also, you know, it gets complicated, the choices we make. You know, there's times when people emotional eat or for whatever reason aren't able to be as physically active. You know, we're all making choices about our lifestyle, and we sometimes choose things that are more healthy and sometimes things that are less healthy. But when we have knowledge, we can choose the more healthy things. You know, also lifestyle choices can be a result of things like depression. People that are depressed often are less active, engage less socially, and turn to substances, among other things. So, you know, if we're just looking at mental health, just like any other health, we do the things to take care of it, and manage it like we would anything else. So, you know, in short, that requires attention and effort, you know, is that in that decision that we're going to take care of our health. And we're all somewhere along a spectrum of that. I mean, there's health nuts and then there's people that just don't make much effort, you know, and mental processes can come into play and where people fall in there. It can range from mild to severe, like we've talked about. Just like with any health issues, seeking professional treatment, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's different options for that. You might go to your PCP and you could be like, let's try an antidepressant, or why don't you do some therapy sessions? Maybe you're really stressed at work, and a lot of workplaces that have benefits have EAP programs that do provide some sessions. So reducing the stigma around that, you know, just like you'd go get physical therapy if you replaced your knee, you would consider that like important therapy to get back your mobility and your functioning in your body. Therapy, mental health therapy is not different than that in many ways. And if you ignore it, like if you ignore that ache in your back and keep lifting things that are too heavy, it's just going to get worse and worse. If you ignore the symptoms of depression or other issues, it's going to get worse, and then it becomes a problem. Whereas you swoop in early, it can help maintain your health and prevent real problems in your life. So, you know, again, that preventative care by checking in with your PCP on your mental health, having healthy habits, the range of self-care options, learning about, you know, like psychoeducation, learning about strategies and skills that can help you are super helpful. So on this page, understanding depression, I think a really useful thing for everybody to know about, and we can share this with constituents, family, friends, health providers, is the perception of what depressed means. Like we all have moods where we go like, oh, I'm really depressed today, you know, or that my friend not showing up for our planned dinner date really depressed me. And that's different than depression as a mental health concern. So a lot of times people just think it's like you're lazy or you're sad, and that's what depression is. What a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of just associated symptoms that come along with depression. And some of them are things you wouldn't think about. I'm going to start my timer. That you wouldn't necessarily think about, like, unless you have that awareness and that education, you know, like unless you have a knowledge base about what depression looks like. So why am I gaining weight and not interested in having my girls' night and feeling, you know, achy and not sleeping well? Those are all symptoms of depression that we can just kind of write off. And they are normal, you know, kind of things that happen in life. But when you start to see 5 or 6 or more of these symptoms showing up in your life for 2 weeks consistently, and it's affecting your normal day-to-day functioning, your ability to care for your kids, your ability to do your job, then it's intruding into your life. And there's enough symptoms that most providers will say, this is looking like some depression. Let's treat it like you would like you would a strep infection, let's treat it, get better, and move on with your life. That's a great way to look at it. So I think the aspect of kind of realizing that a lot of these symptoms are more physical and less about just feeling sad. Feeling sad is part of it. Not liking yourself, being down on yourself is part of it. Some of those more common things we think about are definitely in the picture, but you combine them with extreme fatigue. I just don't have the energy for anything. I can't eat. All these things stacking up. That's what depression starts to look like. And it can become chronic. So, knowledge is power. The other big part of it that is helpful to talk about with, just to talk about with your friends and family and anybody is risk factors. There are just things that happen to us in life, all of us over time, that put us at risk. So just like if you're not eating well, and you're not getting enough nutrition, that might affect other areas of your health. You might go into pre-diabetes stage, or you can, or if you're not exercising, your joints and muscles may not be letting you do as many things as you might want to do in life. If you're in an environment that is unhealthy, like there's black mold in your house, that's a risk factor for your physical health. That's significant. So we all have these things happening in our life. We lose people that die, and we suffer grief. That puts you at risk. It doesn't mean you're going to get depression, but it can put you at risk. If you become a primary caregiver for a loved one undergoing, a special needs child or a parent or spouse, when you're in that situation, 50 to 60% of people do experience some clinical symptoms that are significant. Any health diagnosis or chronic pain, anything having to do with physical health structures put you at risk. Just moving, like if you're a senior, for example, and you move into assisted living, or even if you're downsizing and moving to Arizona, positive or negative things put you at risk. Divorce and trauma of any kind. So if we can recognize the things that are happening in our life, extreme stress at work, as risk factors, then we can be like, okay, I'm in this risky situation. Maybe I need to really also monitor my mental health. And this slide kind of underlines more of that point that if they're also interrelated. When you have physical health problems, you're more likely to have mental health problems. When you have mental health problems, you're more likely to have physical problems, even things that are things like heart disease. When you're depressed, you have way worse outcomes of issues with your heart disease and more likely to have another event just simply by the fact of being depressed. So they're very interconnected. If you don't treat mental health issues, often caused by stress and trauma, it shows up in your life, your ability to, your desire to do things like excel at work or care for your children, which can have negative consequences. Your ability to follow through and meet deadlines or do the things you said you would do, get your garden in on time, whatever it is. And it is a significant factor in affecting productivity at work. And there's some statistics there about that. So I think in terms of, the purpose of really wanting to talk about these things with you guys is because you are important leaders and you set the tone for things. I mean, every single person feeling comfortable with just being like talking about their mental health or others, or just normalizing it like you do any other thing, makes a huge difference. I think that's the number one thing that people can do. And so the commissioners, you guys are like the generals, and everybody in the county are the foot soldiers, in a sense. So the behavioral health services that we have in the county I don't think they're bad. The hospitals have really stepped up versus 10 or 15 years ago, to provide behavioral health services. And so we'll talk about what Rangeley District Hospital has. And then I talked to Becky, the clinic director at Pioneer. She couldn't be here today because it's Rangeley, So do you want to talk about what the clinic does?
I'm Brittany, the clinic director at Rangeley Family Medicine, and we use Fitz Elias. They are based in Payson, Arizona, but they do have an office in Grand Junction, and they've seen over 100,000 patients. They're telehealth based, and we started in 2022 in August, started with 9 patients a month, and we've grown to over 55 a month. So we've seen over 1,000 visits since 22. We have Judy. She's our counselor, and then we also do med management through that program as well with another provider named Ingram, and they're great. They require a referral from one of the providers up at the clinic. So if anyone comes in, we can even see a walk-in. One of those providers will just refer you, and we can get you in usually within 5 days. So usually they see patients twice a week, but if it's a emergency situation, they're great about coming in if needed. So usually we can get patients in within a few days if they need to talk to a therapist. And then depending on what the needs are, they do medication management with the other provider. So there's some options there. And there's statistics on that page with some visit numbers and everything. But I think that's a great service we offer in our rural community. And that's what they focus on as the frontier communities so that we can get those mental health services that are needed.
I think what's great about having it at the clinic, before you get referred out to Mind Springs, and like the clinic is someplace people have already established trust and are familiar with. And it's hard to feel comfortable, taking care of your mental health. And so it's hard to make that next step, to go over, like, used to be in this building, right? To go over here, sit in the waiting room. Everybody knows why you're there. Mind Springs has provided great services and still does. But having it in the clinic, they have a really nice therapeutic room off to the side in a very private area that's really well decorated and everything. So it's very comfortable space. So I think that makes a big difference, that comfort level of just being in a familiar place and transitioning into something that people might be less comfortable with when seeking services. I think that's a big step up to have that here. And the hospital also has the program called Senior Life Solutions, which I think not a lot of people are super familiar with. I'm the program director for that program. And so we are what's called an intensive outpatient program, and it serves seniors specifically. So, seniors, because they've been through so much stuff, and they're entering an area of big changes like retirement or perhaps loss of a spouse and increased health issues, loss of mobility. They're a population that's really at risk. So that's part of why this program exists. And, it's a different type of service than you would get in the clinic, where you get matched up with your therapist and receive one-on-one therapy, one time a week to one time a month, or, whatever the need is. Our program is based on a group therapy model as its primary modality. And it takes a real comprehensive treatment planning approach where patients identify their primary symptoms they want to work on and how to set goals that would show them what their progress looks like as they're decreasing their symptoms. It's a doctor-ordered program. So once someone has gone through an intake in our office, they meet with we have our own physician that meets with them and admits them to the program, and basically would prescribe them up to 3 days a week of group therapy, 3 sessions a day, so about 3 hours. And then they also meet individually with our therapist. We have a licensed clinical therapist 2 to 4 times a month. It's a integrated care model. It's very comprehensive. So we're monitoring vital signs and doing nursing screens, communicating with their PCPs regularly. And when they discharge from the program, we provide aftercare and follow-up. And what's really cool about this program, it can sound like a lot, but for people that have the time, it's so effective. Again, it's kind of like physical therapy or cardiac rehab, where you come in, you work on something intensively, like your knee replacement. You go in multiple times and you get that mobility back and you get feeling better and you build that base and foundation. There's a timeline for that. So people start to feel better really quickly. They really enjoy the program. It focuses quite a bit on psychoeducation, which is teaching those basic skills, like teaching about what symptoms look like, that you're treating symptoms, and learning skills, and then providing support as you practice those skills. And then eventually people taper down to less meetings per week until they discharge. So it's a really special program, and it's a great opportunity because it kind of comes in and can help treat people quickly, through a shorter term thing. And then we discharge them to a regular therapist to follow up with if they want to keep, that kind of maintenance. Pioneers Medical Center has great services too. They are up to having 4 licensed clinical therapists working with their clinic. So they have full-time coverage, including Saturday mornings. All but one of those days, they have therapists there in person. So that it provides a different option. Our therapists are coming in through telehealth, but some people, that's just a deal breaker for them. Telehealth is a great option, but for some people, that's just a deal breaker. So it's nice to have that in the county. They can usually see people in 2 weeks, but if the need is more acute, they can get people in earlier. They also provide, after somebody has been in the clinic in person for their first visit, they give them the option for telehealth, which for some people, there's a privacy element of that, which is appealing. Or if you're very depressed, you can have trouble with isolating yourself and leaving your room. And so that can help provide a stepping stone to getting out of the house more, but still receiving treatment. The Senior Life Solutions program has both options as well. People can participate in the program completely through telehealth. We provide iPads for that, and we're expanding our services to the greater region. But so we can serve more people as well. And then I think both emergency rooms at the hospital work with a telepsych doctor when there's emergency issues. And for us, it's Fitz Elias as well, right?
Mine Springs is still.
Oh, it's still?
Yep.
Okay. And with Pioneers, they're working with Swedish Medical Center in Denver. So when people come in with crisis situations in the emergency room for their mental health, they're treated with a teledoc, and then resources are given and they're directed other places. And so other options for people, if that our direct services in the county aren't a fit for some reason, or they need more, we still have Mind Springs. It was just purchased by a Health Solutions in Colorado Springs, and now they're rebranding it as Health Solutions West. That's brand new, and they're continuing their teletherapy services. But they're no longer, they have no plans to. They closed their West Springs inpatient hospital in Grand Junction, and they don't have any plans to reopen it anytime soon, maybe in the future. So they provide a full range of behavioral health services, and they're still available completely through telehealth. There is a new inpatient hospital that's just opened in Vail called Precourt Healing Center. So, inpatient services are always hard to find. is my understanding. And so that has added to the Western Slopes options for outpatient health. And of course, people get sent to Denver and Salt Lake City as well. And then there's two different addiction treatment options in the Craig and Steamboat areas that people are referred out to as well. And then lastly, I think something a lot of people don't think about is, so not every therapist is the right fit. Sometimes it takes trying different therapists to find that person that's really going to be a fit for you. And so most insurance companies now, you can access a lot of teletherapy services. You can go to Psychologies Today. They've got a great database, and search for therapists in all of Colorado that take your insurance, and basically, have a lot of options too. So being such a remote area, that does open up a lot of options, because finding the right fit is important. But I think our local hospital, and the clinics, have really done amazing, bringing these services in the last 5 to 10 years, and really improves people's comfort level, and the doctors and providers really integrate with that. Any questions or thoughts on any of that?
Thank you for coming to the meeting and integrating with us. I wish that pioneers would do that more. You guys do a good job, and we appreciate it.
No problem. Becky at Pioneers was super helpful. She just couldn't make it today, but she was real excited to be able to share what they had going on too.
Thank you for getting that information across the county as well as outside. I do appreciate that. I know sometimes I get calls and need to know where do I direct them. So I do appreciate it.
Albin County, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for
Thank you,
giving us
guys.
the time.
Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay,
Oh,
so
and don't forget your snag.
thank you. We will be moving on to line item B, a presentation by Dana Foley with CTSI reviewing our 5-year loss analysis.
We've got to get back to work. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good morning, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Dana.
Outstanding. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time this morning. I'll try to keep this as brief and short as possible for you, and leave open times for questions and answers, etc. So again, thank you. I'm Dana Foley. I'm your senior loss control specialist assigned to Rio Blanco County. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about your 5-year loss analysis. This is something that we do every year. And I always like to start off and just give a brief overview of CTSI, the pool, what that does for the counties, and then followed up by a recap of our year end. How did we finish last year in terms of our losses? And that way, as we look at our 5-year, we can see whether or not we are gaining on trends, holding steady on trends, or creating new trends from that standpoint. So with that, as members of CTSI of the CWCP, that's the work comp pool, and the CAP pool, you are not only members of those pools, but as members, you're also owners of CTSI. So just as a reminder that CTSI is county owned, county operated, that the pools are operated by commissioners from around the state. And we insure about 50 of the 64 counties of Colorado. That's all CTSI does. Again, we're a pool, so we're not like a traditional insurance company. Essentially what happens is your contributions go into an account, we pay the claims, the board sets a reserve, and then anything above that reserve goes back to the counties in form of a equity distribution. So CTSI doesn't hang on to the funds of the counties. So I always say, where in the county do you get to spend that same nickel twice? It's in the pools. And the best insurance advice I can give you is you buy the promise, but you don't use the product. That keeps everything low. And that's kind of where loss control really comes in, is every year we look at our pool as a whole and try to understand where our trends are, what our root causes and contributing factors are. That way we can start to help with prescriptive ways of looking at additional trainings, policies, additional help, classes, etc. And then we're also a sounding board for the counties in terms of, if you're going to do a new building or you're going to venture out into a different level of service, etc. That's always a good time to reach out to us. Also, if you have a critical incident as well, reaching out to us. Again, we work for you. So it's not like a traditional insurance company where, you submit a claim or have a question and all of a sudden that makes people nervous, etc. We're here to help you and be a resource, a valued resource for you. So that being said, I talked a little bit about the equity distribution last year. Out of the CWCP pool, that's the workers' compensation pool, we gave back over $4 million to our county members. Out of that CAP pool, the general liability, property, sheriff's liability, auto, all of that, we gave back $500,000 to our pool members. And then when your money sits, the contributions that you put to CTSI at the beginning of the policy year, that sits in an account, that account earns interest. Well, that interest also gets to go back to the counties as well. So it's not just sitting there, not doing anything when it's not being used. We gave back over $975,000 to our pool members. So what did that do for Rio Blanco? Of the $4 million that we gave back to the pool members, Rio Blanco got $42,803 back out of that pool. From the $500,000 for the CAP pool, you got back $14,501. And of that $975,000 of interest, you got back $15,710 for a grand total of $73,014 back to the county. So one of the other things that we also do is we'll break out specifically the sheriff's exposure in this last 5 years. Every year we'll give a 5-year loss analysis specifically to the sheriff as well, so that the sheriff can understand where their risk and liabilities are and where they've been, and then particularly any trends that are occurring from there. And it also gives a real good understanding of how you compare with your peers of other sheriff's office from around the state as well. So with that, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into last year. So this is from 1/1 of 24 to 12/31 of 24. You had 3 claims for $14,827. Every one of them involved something to do with auto. And you'll also see that from the pool trend that auto exposures are most likely our number one claims risk. And then it also has the number one payout when you take out some of the shock losses that have occurred throughout the state as well. But that being said, it's been a couple of years since we've done a defensive driving class with the county, and I would also make a recommendation that I come out. It's a free class. It's a 3-hour long class for county members to come out and do a defensive driving class. And some of the things that we do touch base on with that is some of the new laws, how they're applied, etc. In that. At the end of that class, you get a certificate that some have been able to successfully go to their personal insurance carrier and receive a discount for attending a defensive driving class through their insurance provider on their personal vehicles as well. So there's an added little caveat there for that. Another positive with this as well is our sheriff, should the sheriff deem that those 3 hours count towards their the deputy's post certification, the sheriff can deem those hours to count towards that as well. So any questions on the 3 claims? You had two deer hits and one commercial vehicle, county vehicle with another motor vehicle incident there.
As I was seeing your first 2, I'm thinking maybe it's the deer that we need to. Because in this country, that's what you get.
I understand, and I always use that road between Meeker and Craig as a prime example that if the zombie apocalypse comes, that's where I'm going because there's a lot of food up there. So it is definitely one of those areas, and some of that, you know, is really the time of day of when they're on the move, etc. A lot of times you'll know where those herds are located and where they generally like to hang out as well. And so there's an awareness factor that can come in on that too. So, but definitely, yes, the deer have definitely wreaked havoc on county vehicles from that standpoint. So a little bit on how the pool did, because again, your pool members and also pool owners, it's always good to kind of understand what some of the effects are of the pool, because just because you may not be having those exposures, your pool members are like in kind, just like you. So it's important to understand what some of their exposures have been, just to keep in mind. So as you're looking at policy reviews and updates to manuals and things like that throughout the year, it's not a bad idea to reach out to us as we can help you kind of understand what some of the latest trends are from the pool. They had a total of 606 claims last year for a grand total of $8,031,686, with the average cost of $13,254. And so take note of that, $13,254, because as we look at our 5-year average cost is going to be skewed from a couple of catastrophic incidences that have happened over the last 5 years. That being said, we'll go on to the next page here, and this is that page where it lines out the type of claims that have occurred throughout the county members and throughout the pool. When you start to add up all of the vehicle-related incidences and the number of claims and the number of dollars, it very quickly jumps to the top of the scale. Last year, we did have a couple of fire-related claims as well, and in some of the loss analyses that I've done on those, we are seeing that some fires were caused by lithium-ion batteries. And one of the things that I noted as a board-certified fire protection specialist is that in our county buildings, a lot of times we don't have the fire extinguisher rated for lithium-ion battery fires, particularly with the thermal runaway. Now, they do have a new fire extinguisher out that is a lithium-ion fire extinguisher that does deal with that. It's kind of it's almost like a gel or an aquatic type of fire retardant that also encapsulates and helps to work with that thermal runaway on these batteries. So it is something that I'm encouraging. Certainly CTSI doesn't say you must do anything. It's just an encouragement that as you think about where you might have higher exposures to the lithium-ion batteries, those can be anywhere from in your laptop computers to our cell phones to several shops. In my career in the insurance industry, several shops have been burnt down from cordless tools and the lithium-ion batteries being left in the chargers, and then eventually they short out and start a fire from there. But back to the auto The auto exposure can hit multiple lines of coverage. It not only hits the auto coverage, but it could also hit property coverage. It could hit property coverage and also workers' comp coverage. And then if it was something with the sheriff's office as well, it could also hit sheriff's liability too. And so you will see, I believe we did have in the last 5 years, we did have a couple of auto-related claims, but it was also a workers' comp claim. So when you add that into this and look at, our 1.5 million, when we start to add up all of those plus the workers' comp side of things, auto-related claims really are one of the largest exposures the county faces. Moving on to our workers' comp. Again, this is from 1/1 of 24 to 12/31 of 24. We had a total of 14 claims for $298,488. And as I look in here in terms of any big trends, the bigger trends are the indemnity claims. And so when you look at this report and you see the number of indemnity claims in here, indemnity is in the workers' comp world, you have the bucket that puts people back together, but then there's another bucket that also covers their lost time from work as well. And so you may have some leeway to lower our exposure in that indemnity bucket by looking at that return to work program aspect, as well as when they can come back to work and what they can do. Typically, employees do not have to stay in the department that they're in. You could use them elsewhere in the county for light duty if you needed to as well. So that is a trend that I did see that kind of stood out looking at last year, is those indemnity related claims. And you can notice that those indemnities are definitely a higher dollar value as well as we go through those. So any questions on last year?
I don't. No, we don't.
Is everybody still awake?
We are.
Okay. All right. Sometimes it can be like, oh no, these numbers. So last year, I'm going to jump into the 5-year loss analysis report, and that's going to be from 2020 through 2024. Okay, as of the end of December of 2024. And I absolutely love this trend that we're seeing right here, is that our liability side on the cap, and that's your auto, property, general liability, et cetera, even the sheriff's liability. But look at this trend line, and we're dropping really well, and that's outstanding, and one of the better trend lines that I've seen recently with counties. So you guys are doing an outstanding job of that and looking, and especially with just a couple of claims that we saw there. Next year, when I meet with you, 2020 will drop off, and let's hope we get to replace 2020 with another real low year like 2024, and that's going to yield really well for the county as well. What we do is break down our 19 claims over the last 5 years, and we had 19 claims for $249. And now look at this average price per claim. So $9,855. And you remember I told you to take note of the price per claim last year with the pool, and that was $13,254. So what this is saying is that you are well under the average of what we're seeing with the pool members. So that means while you may have had a few claims, they've actually been relatively low in severity from that standpoint. We break it down by the top 5 frequency and severity by the departments. So we have administration followed up by law enforcement and road and bridge. Now keep in mind, administration doesn't mean that the county staff is causing all of the 6 claims and over, that's also property as well. So that's where your property is put into. And again, on the severity side, we have administration, law enforcement, and then road and bridge. Typically, you're going to see road and bridge usually at the top, back and forth on the cap side of things, is because they're the highest exposure of your auto and exposure to the public as well. Moving on, what were the actual causes of those 19 claims? And we can look here, and there's our friendly animal strike. We've got five claims of the animal strike, but we also have a couple of additional vehicles. So nine vehicle claims out of that. And then when we look at the severity side of it, we have vehicle jackknives, vehicle striking objects, vehicle striking animals, and you can see where that very quickly jumps to the top in that severity aspect. So once again, just kind of reiterating my recommendation that we do a defensive driving class this year. And then where does the information come from that goes into those pie charts? That's all right here in the, we include that so you can have some specifics of the claims and what department and how much they cost. Moving on with the pool, we had 3,100 claims for $78,315,600 with our average cost. You can see how that's way up there at $25,263. And that's some of the, the bigger claims. And frankly, any one of our counties could have had a couple of those incidences. And that's where your loss control team coming in and really looking and diving into those root causes and contributing factors of those once they're closed out, and we can really look and analyze those claims and look for those root causes, and then also come up with some prescriptive ways. Particularly the claims came out of the sheriff operations, and we look at things like peer-to-peer de-escalation and partnerships with our municipalities that are within our counties, and that helps us with our multi-jurisdictional responses, et cetera, just so that they're on the same page when those incidences occur, and that way there's kind of an understanding of how to work through those incidences as well. That being said, we break down the top 5 frequency and severity with those claims, and you can see where the vehicle strikes are way up there. But this is one that we have really been harping on over the last 2 years, and it has shown. We were at 17% of all of our vehicle-related claims were from backing, literally just backing into things. Over the last 2 years, we've actually dropped that with the emphasis from loss control. We're down to 7%. So we've had a 10% reduction just by implementing and encouraging counties to implement a no backing policy. It's low hanging fruit. They just have to look, or if they can't see, have somebody ground guide them in. Okay. Then in the severity, we can see that a couple of those on the severity side was fatalities that have occurred within county members in the pool as a whole. And then here's the detail of what information went into those reports as well. And so are there any questions on the cap side of your 5-year loss trends?
You guys have anything?
I have nothing.
No questions yet.
Is it clear as mud?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I will move on to our workers' compensation. And we can see here, this one's a little bit different story than what we saw on the cap side. And part of that, where you're seeing this spike, is that we did have a number of those indemnity-related claims. So those are a little bit more severe in nature, because not only did we have the medical side of it, but we also have lost time on some of those claims as well. So then we look at, we had a total of, in the last 5 years, 56 claims for $663,982, with our average cost of $11,857. Our top 5 frequency and severity came out of road and bridge and road and bridge and law enforcement in terms of the frequency. Those are your higher physically demanding positions, and that's something that we typically see. They go hand in hand, back and forth. Then we moved down into our road and bridge. We had on the severity, they led on the severity side. And then our law enforcement, which is way down over here. So even though they had a higher frequency, their types of injuries that they had were relatively low in exposure and severity. Then we break down the top 5 frequency and severity of what caused it. Slip and falls, given the fact that we live in Colorado, and as the flat counties out in the eastern plains, they call the mountain counties, they call you all slopers, because everything's on a slope, and they think that that's where a lot of the slip and falls come from, is that, you know, the slope effect. But really it's the freeze thaw, 3 points of contact, getting in and out of vehicles, proper footwear, which when I see claims come in, I get to see all the claims that come in, and when they're submitted, I do look at the incident reports and the investigation reports. And what I'm really looking for in those is, are we getting to some of the root cause and contributing factors when we do have these slip and fall claims, so that we can start to see, is it truly a footwear or an environment type of thing. And so with that, we're asking supervisors to fill out that accident investigation report. But then how do we expect them to do it right if we don't train on it? That is something else that I would recommend that we look at as an additional training for supervisors, as well as some accident investigation training, looking for those root causes and contributing factors going into this. And here you can also see, you know, the fail to yield right away, that caused a workers' compensation claim. So there's a double exposure event right there that we saw. Again, just like on the CAP side, we actually have it listed out in here by department and the type of claims and the dollar amounts that came with that. And so we could see out of that road and bridge how much that we had 2 of those 2 injuries as a result of that one accident. And just like on the CAP side, how did the pool do? Well, slip and falls from the pool itself is the #1 loss driver for the pools. So the county is right in line with the pool members as well, in terms of the top frequency and severity of the claims, which is slip and falls. And then you are seeing, now, fortunately, you don't have a jail, so you're not seeing a whole lot with the inmate aspect. But if you were operating the jail, that would be a higher exposure as well, is that inmate related claims of hurting our corrections officers in there. So then we break it down, and we have all of these claims and the dollar amounts. I mean, just that slip and fall, over $9,134,499 to our pool members just from slip and fall claims. But just like with the other report, you could start to add up all of these vehicle related incidences on the work comp side as well. And that's why I said very quickly that becomes our #1 exposure. So with that, any questions? Any concerns?
With the inmate component, since we don't operate a jail, but if there was a claim done in Moffat County, would it be reported under Rio Blanco if it's one of our inmates, or does it stay under Moffett?
It would generally stay under Moffett because of how you're, it's Moffitt's employee that would be injured at that point. Now, sometimes when there are claims against, somebody's civil rights in the correction center, sometimes both counties are named in those claims, et cetera. But that's when our legal team and our claims representatives really kind of help to disseminate and kind of work through that as well. So that's why it's so important to make sure that those MOUs and things like that are and IGAs are reviewed periodically as well.
Dawn, you have a question?
Laura does. She's in here with me.
Oh,
Hey Dana, it's Laura.
Hi, Laura.
I wondered if you would review for the commissioners briefly, like the subrogation. When our employees are in an accident and it is determined that it's caused by someone else.
Sure. To keep it simple, essentially, we will go after the other party and try to recover costs. But oftentimes, what happens is it's not always dollar for dollar that we are able to recover, and then we can't recover those costs until the claim is closed out as well. So there's a challenge there of there's sometimes can be a long delay. I mean, if someone is severely injured, sometimes it takes 3-4 years, 5 years, 10 years to really settle out some of the claims. And that's why it's important to, really our claim staff really is they're seasoned. We don't have CTSI doesn't have a lot of turnover. They understand and historically, and then we also have the rest of the pool to look at. So when we set those reserve limits as well, that's an important piece to think of as well, is that we don't overinflate our reserves, because that in your calculations on your contributions, you're not getting that extra hit, because they think, well, it might be $100,000 claim, when really in our historical knowledge of that type of claim with claims in the county, it might be a $30,000 claim, those type of things as well. So does that help? Did I hit that one, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
any questions
I don't
from either of you? The only other question that I have really quick, sorry, is during our board meeting a few months ago, you had on there that you guys were looking into liability insurance for drones and liquor. I'm curious as to why. I mean, I didn't see any of that on our reports, but is there a problem with other counties that's happening, or is that just something that's been brought to your attention by another county?
There are a number of exposure concerns with drones. They can open the county up for liability, particularly when they're used for events. Anytime you're flying over people's property, if something were to happen to that drone and it were to fly into property, hurt someone, or if that drone is lost and destroyed, that the county has coverage with that. There's also a concern that I've known, being in the insurance industry, when it's used in that capacity, also privacy concerns as well. And so there's a potential where, is somebody, ensuring that proper training is there, that you've got the proper flight paths documented and things like that as well, so that should someone try to, bring a invasion of privacy claim or something to that effect, that we would expect that to be part of that coverage too.
Perfect.
And we're seeing more and more counties utilizing these. They're utilizing them for search and rescue. They're utilizing these for fire incidences. We're also seeing them used in, for community monitoring, parades, all of that stuff. So again, there's a potential there. So in terms of liquor and liquor liability, some counties that have event space that is utilized a lot more for weddings and other types of things like that. Some counties, there's always the question of if this person wants to bring their own liquor in for that event and things like that, to make sure that we've got the right amount of coverage and to protect the county.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. One other thing to note, in July of this year, the MSHA will be, so the MSHA is the Mine Safety and Health Administration from the federal government, that if you have some of your road and bridge, oftentimes they'll have a pit or a mine or a quarry for their mining sand and gravel operations. There is a new silica standard that was adopted by MSHA last year, and now it requires air monitoring to determine whether or not employees are exposed to higher levels of silica. And so I'm bringing that as an awareness to the county because there may be an increased cost with that. MSHA can come out and do your initial testing. However, with the initial testing, it may tell you whether you're at the exposure level or the action level. And then there's additional items that come into play should you hit that trip mark on there. So just to be aware that there is a new standard there that also has to be retested every 6 months or every time you set up or move that operation. So if you move from one pit to the next, it has to be tested again. They also say that drivers, so CDL drivers that oftentimes go into the pits and get loaded out for sand and gravel chip seal operations, if they're in the pit 3 consecutive days, they're considered a miner and need to also have that new miner or that new miner certification. And so that is something also that CTSI offers for experienced new miners, which is the shorter class, but we offer that as for free as well.
We, in Rio Blanco County, our crushing is done by a contractor.
Okay.
Who's liable?
Well, if our employees go into their pits and
It's
they
our
go in
pits.
more than, pardon?
It's our pits. They're just coming in crushing our gravel.
Yeah. So they would need to have that monitoring done. That contractor would have to have that monitoring done. And then that would tell you whether or not they're at the permissible exposure. However, our drivers that go into that pit as well to get loaded out, we would want to, they have to be part of that test as well to see whether or not they're exposed above those limits. And then they would also have to be in that, they have to have that MSHA new miner certification and then the annual as well. If they hit the permissible exposure limit, then that requires pulmonary function testing at higher and things like that. So, and that's where some of the increased costs could come into play.
Yeah, our exposure there is pretty limited because they just stockpile it and we come in later and pick it up. So there's not a lot of dust.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But it's that testing requirement for the miners that kind of comes into play there too. One other note that I will say is we did have Morgan County reported to me that the MSHA inspectors have been out Apparently they got doged and their Denver office was shut down. And so now their inspectors are required to be out in their vehicles. And then every week they have to report how many inspections they've done and things like that. And Morgan got, they made it a point to tell us they got hit because of a dirty Porta-John. And they, believe it or not, they actually wrote them up as a near fatal. And I said, how dirty does a Porta-John have to be a near fatal? But apparently the stuff was coming out of, it was above the rim level. So I'm like, that's pretty dirty. So, but that being said, they are out in force and they could be coming to a pit near you.
Well, we will make sure we let our road and bridge director know. Miss Vicky, who is our county administrator, is not here today. So I know I've written down a list of to-dos for her to look into, especially with all of your recommendations with the trainings and defensive driving. So we'll follow up with her and have her follow up on all of these items and go from there.
All right. Well,
Good.
any other questions?
Nope, I think we're good. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time this morning.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, moving on to line item C.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, CCCAP, MOU Amendment Number 2 to on-base number 404-194-10 for DHS.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do any of you have any questions?
Yeah, can you explain that to me?
Yep, there you go. So it's an MOU that we do with CCAP. So it's Department of Human Services, Colorado Department of Human Services has this other department. And so that's like your early childhood development as well as like paying for daycare for somebody. And so they just have to do this every year. It'll renew itself. And this one's for 3 years. So it started back in 23 and then 26. So it's just how we do business with each other, with the state and ourselves here locally.
Okay.
So why an amendment? It's
Carmen, can you explain, Carmen, are you still there? Or
Yes, I am.
Okay. You want to explain the amendment?
Yes, usually it's every year. They're changing it to every 3 years. So that's the amendment piece of the MOU. So instead of you guys having to change it every 3 years, every year, we only have to sign it every 3 years.
I see that it just extended it by 1 year, extended the contract by 1 year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I
Which
just
makes it
didn't
every
understand that. Yeah. Okay.
And not changing the dollar amount, correct, Carmen?
Correct. That's why it just says that on there about the years rather than the dollar amount.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sean, will you please call the roll?
O'Hairn,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Scritchfield.
Motion passes. Moving on to the discussion and consideration of applying for a HCPF healthcare policy and finance preferred project grants for DHS. There are multiple areas that have available grants, including rule implementation, internal control drafting, community collaboration, and more. So Carmen, I'm going to let you take it away unless it's Dawn.
I could start, Dawn, and if you want to jump in, that'd be great. So basically what this is HCPF is offering a grant for us to do the new rule implementation. We believe that there will be as many as 20 new rules with different ranges of in complex that are pretty complex. And so the release for those rules will start May of 2025, and they're thinking all the way to January of 2026. They'll be kind of, and if you think about it, I know it sounds like, oh, that's a couple months, but that's a lot for HICPUF. So they are offering us a what's called the rule implementation up to $25,000, so we can get the support and the training and all the needs as a department to make sure we fulfill what we need to in implementing these rules and how that's going to affect our community as well. And so let's see, I'm trying to think of anything else. We'll have like a plan that I can probably present after if we get accepted on how we're going to work that out, like, you know, step 1, 2, 3, and what that will look like. If we want to get a contractor, we can do that. We can work with other other counties. So it's kind of pretty open, which I appreciate, to make sure we're getting all the information that we want. And we want to make sure that, of course, when we are implementing these rules and we are having our techs do these implementations, that their timelines are not really behind. And so that's what this is also for. Like, hey, this rule just came out. Make sure you're doing A, B, and C, and by this deadline. So that's kind of like a quick just rundown of it. If you need me to explain more, I can. Does that kind of help a little bit, or do you want more details?
Another thing is this doesn't require us to take the grants. This is just allows us to apply. So when we see what the deliverables of that grant are, we can make an independent decision.
Yes.
So far, I don't see anything in it or anything in the application process that gives me concern. But you just never know. The state is doing a lot of implementation of different things that we're going to have to comply with, and hopefully this will help us train our staff so we don't have as much of a get behind the learning curve on it.
Yeah, because as you know, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you guys are pretty much already doing a lot of this, Carmen. I think you guys have been doing it for a while. That's why your C stats are up, and you guys are recognized constantly by the state. So why don't you get paid for doing what you guys are already doing? So I'm in support of it because I think you guys are already heading down that road and have been doing that for a while now. Your staff is amazing in that area. So I'm in support of it, but I don't know where these two sit.
I agree.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess I was just questioning, Dawn, what you help me understand when you say when we get to see the deliverables. So we're not, in your grant application, you're not saying this is what we would do. Are you applying for something that says this is what you will do?
Well, but basically what it does is we have to develop a plan, like Carmen said, when we apply for it. So we develop a plan, we show them what we think we can do with the money, right? And like any other grant application, when they award it to us, and that's when we accept it, then that's a lot of times that's when we see if there's any conditions or strings attached to the grant that we can't comply with, or we don't want to comply with, or we think it's not worth complying with, then we can make a determination of that. But what we're asking for today is allow Carmen to develop the plans on how she could use this money to assist and to apply for the grant itself, and then we'll relook. And just the reason I mention that is because it's always important before we actually accept the grant that we know what requirements and obligations it's going to cause on us. Some of them are pretty minimal. They're just like they say they are, and we don't have to worry too much about it. And then some of them we look at and say, okay, do we really need to do this? Like, for example, on some of the road and bridge grants that they were doing, they had specific things requiring COVID implementation for different things that are really not tied in with the road and bridge things. We went ahead and did them because they, a lot of money for those type of grants, but those are things that we just need to know if they come up. And I'm not sure there'll be anything that's scary there, but I just always want to make sure that we look for those when we accept those grants.
Okay, thank you.
So do you need a motion from us because it's due by next Friday? We're not gonna have another meeting until afterwards. So do you need a motion from us for her to be able to do that?
Yes, if you would, I think that would be helpful.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve applying for the HCPF preferred project grants for DHS.
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second. Anything else from either one of you? Sean, will you please call the roll?
Scritchfield? Aye. Overton?
All right,
O'Hairn?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Moving on to line item E.
Madam Chairman, I want to make a motion to approve the granting, to approve the grant approval to purchase a Caterpillar 309 excavator for the road and bridge.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. You want to, oh, there, you're already there. Thank you. That was. So do you want to explain this to us?
So this will be the purchase of a smaller excavator for the county. We'll be trading in a backhoe that we currently have, a low hour backhoe. We'll be getting quite a bit of money for the backhoe, which will bring down the cost of the smaller excavator. The excavator's been requested by the Road and Bridge Department. Both sides have requested it. It'll improve our work with the roads. Road and Bridge has indicated they could put the thing to use pretty much daily. It would improve drainage improvements for the roads. Safety would be a big thing. It would allow guys to be in the cab operating the machine, and the machine would be doing the work instead of the guys out on the ground working shovels and straining their back, that kind of thing. Overall, just even more efficiency with culvert cleaning and cattle guard cleaning, that kind of thing. That's, yeah. Oh.
Ryan, was this in your budget?
Yes, it is. And it will be kept.
That's way that
Makes
we're going,
sense to
that
me.
using a lot of those users.
They're so much handier.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm talking about insurance, workman's comp.
Exactly.
This will help with that. So
Exactly. That's, yep.
tie that in. So anything else?
I don't know if it'll help with the deer relations.
No.
Sorry.
John, will you please call the roll?
Overton?
Aye.
O'Hairn?
Aye.
Scritchfield? Aye.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Moving on to line item F.
Madam Chair, I would approve a letter or comments submitted to Colorado Parks and Wildlife regarding their proposed strategic plan.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Is Reese on the phone? I don't know.
I think he's.
Yeah, he
was.
I am, yes.
Oh, do you want to explain this a little bit for us?
Yeah, the comments you will be approving will also be provided by AG&C. So the end of last week, Jeff Comstock and Kirby and myself reviewed comments, submitted them to Tiffany with AG&C, and I anticipate those will be in the meeting tomorrow for approval to be submitted officially by AG&C.
Perfect. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Anything else?
No, that's great.
Sean, will you please call the roll?
O'Hairn?
Aye.
Scritchfield? Aye. Overton?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to the discussion and direction to staff with possible decision on the 2025 Meeker Airport GA ramp replacement project.
Morning, Eric.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Another one just sneaks in there.
Yeah.
So this is following up our discussion we had on Monday, May 19th on the direction that we want to take for the Meeker Airport GA ramp project. At the end of that meeting, so we had provided a couple options for the board. They're not the only options, but the most simplistic one was option one, that we currently have this is difficult going back in the glasses. We currently have budgeted in 2025 $3 million for this project with all the with the budgets with the bids in for construction, and then of course these for engineering. The total project is estimated at $3,459,097.39, and that's no contingency included in that. So there's a delta of $459,097.39 that we have in the budget. Of course, option one that I presented to the board was that we cover this delta between what we currently have budgeted for the $3 million and the $459,097.39. And then we could look at shifting our project plan for the two airports and paying ourselves back with bill and entitlement funds. Or option kind of 1.5 is that we cover that $459,097.39, and we continue on with our current 10-year plan with the Meeker Airport and Rangeley Airports with allocating those entitlements and bills to the projects that's within our WIMS and not impacting those. And then, of course, the third option would be that we forego doing this project in 2025. We shifted to 2026, and we look at shifting our WIMS projects or our project 10-year plan for the two airports and utilizing the bill and entitlement funds to cover that offset and send the project back out to bid and construct it 2026. The board had, at the end of it, felt that they needed more information regarding potential funding sources that we could look at with, that we can provide with, recovering this delta of $459,097. We went through and of course, did Lisa and Vicky forward you on the spreadsheets? Okay. So there's a couple contingency funds in there on capital fund, general fund. There's some other items, right? These are shared pools in those funds. So there was a $272,000 in capital fund. There was another fund of $100,000 that was in our contingency and general fund, and then there's another bucket of $1,086,400 in contingency that's available on our general fund. Typically, what I've seen in the past commissioners do is they don't touch this. We always carry the general fund contingencies and leave them bit, because that's also covering not just capital, but other general funded operations of the county, you know, whether it be road and bridge, facilities, all the IT, all those different other entities, and that's where that bucket is. We looked at the SLFRF Capital Outlay Fund. We had $228,900 in that fund. We have already spent of that $228,000, $178,419, which was our firewall refresh for IT, our XDR update for RT and IT, and our backup refresh for IT. And then in March, 11th board meeting, I had presented to the board that we would do a GPON XGS PON upgrade for the broadband department. And so that ate up that $228,900 for the SLRF fund. In that meeting, I'd also requested 306,000 to another 226,000 for the network update. So in that meeting, I had I requested a total of, well, this is like math class. So between the XGS PON upgrade for the broadband and the new the switch upgrades, I'd requested a total of $533,433 for those two projects. We funded $50,481 out of the SLFRF fund, which left us with $482,952 to come out of the LATCF funds. Now, at the beginning of the year, we had $2,495,847 in that LATCF fund. We have chosen to do the ITG PON project, which was a $336,175 project. And then we chose to do the operations security system update. That's the cameras and doors, which was a $494,401 project, less my $482,952 XGS PON and broadband switch upgrade project, which leaves you with $1,182,319 in the LATCF fund that I'm aware of has not been allocated to any other projects. We also have our CCITF fund, which was currently, I think we have $22,026,937.49. What I've seen the boards do in the past is they tend to try to keep that fund above the $20 million mark, which I think was the original allocated fund, and we utilize the revenue brought in by interest on those funds. This is what Lisa has presented. I worked with Lisa on presenting different fund buckets that we could pull that shortfall of the $459,097.39 from to cover that this year. So I guess the trying to narrow this down to simplistic direction. First direction is, are we going to cover the delta of the 459.97 this year and proceed forward? Second is, what bucket are we pulling that from? And then the third would be, do we intend on paying ourselves back in the next year and then sliding the projects out? Or do we just push all this out till next year and deal with it?
So yesterday I went to the Meeker Airport to, kind of get my bearings since I had went and toured the Rangeley one the previous week. The area that you're talking about doing this on, is that where they're also going to be putting in the fuel farm?
No, the planned fuel farm areas, there's a open island that sits between the large aircraft and the small aircraft apron that's clear. It's just weeds and space. That's where we're intending on putting the new fuel farm.
And so the GA ramp, where is that located out there then?
So as you walk through that front gate, that's that ramp that does this all the way to that island is where this project is.
And because I know you talked about at one point that 50 feet of that, which is FAA won't touch because it's county property. in front of those hangars. And that's why we're looking at this 459? No.
Well, kind of. So the 50-foot in front of a privately owned hangar is non-FAA funded. And so, if you're standing there on that apron, right, and you're looking north, every one of those buildings that run north that are hangars, and then it starts with Coulter Aviation's maintenance shop, and then every one of those hangars that run north up to the very last one before we get to the big apron, big hangar project, right? Those are all currently privately owned hangars. So what we've done is we've leased the ground to those owners, and then they built their structure on it. The way FAA sees it is that 50-foot in front of those hangars that ties that ramp, that's exclusive use. And so the FAA says, we're not paying for that piece of the project. It's not available for FAA funding. Now, if the county owned those hangars, it would be covered all the way up to it because we're the sponsor and it'd be part of the whole operation of the airports. So there's about $779,000 of that. We're going to talk in generalities because I'm getting tired of spouting out the numbers, right?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we're gonna look at-
They'll never need to go to the cents.
So of the 3.4 million total project value, there's about 780,000 of that is that piece of asphalt that is connecting that. Okay. So that would immediately drop you down, looking at rough numbers, down to about 2.7 million of the project that is available to be FAA funded. Of that 2.7, we currently have 1.9 million, right? That is in the bank. The FAA is available for that, right? So that leaves us with about $800,000. So we got a bucket of 780,000 that FAA says we're not paying for it. County, as a sponsor, you figure it out. And then we have 800,000 that is FAA available funded, but FAA doesn't have that amount. And that's when you can take and say, okay, of that 800, 545,000 of that, we could pay ourselves back next year with the entitlement and bills and recoup some of that. We'll never recoup any of the 780,000 of exclusive apron use. Now, a couple of things with that 780,000. There is pathways for us to work with those privately owned hangar to look at recouping that cost. In my viewpoint, it would have been really nice to have started 10 years back and started building that fund up so that then we would have that 780,000. I'm not entirely certain with legality of the likelihood of us recouping that. I think that's more of a Mr. Stearman's kind of viewpoint and understanding. But there is a pathway for that if the county chooses to do that. I think is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And I know that you've went over this multiple times with us, and I did get to go up and see that. And we're going to get to go see it again in June, I guess it is. But remind me, and so I'm just thinking about, okay, so if we don't do it this year, is there a safety concern?
That's
I mean,
that's a tough one to answer because I don't have
a crystal ball.
that well, and I don't have the airport background side of it. So I'm cautious in what I'm going to answer, right?
Appreciate that.
And so I have more of a project management background. And so from my project management background, I would look and say, currently the asphalt, it's not like it's falling off a cliff. We're not losing aircraft into holes, right? It's doing what it needs to do. So from a construction and usability, it looks like it's still doing what it's always done. There hasn't been anything new in the last 2 or 3 years that we've identified where now we're starting to cone off areas and we really need to make sure that no aircraft goes in there or somebody's going to disappear, right? That doesn't exist. Now, that's not answering from a pilot's stance and answering from owning aircraft and doing that. That's just merely looking at saying these aircraft are moving on the road. They're kind of doing what they need to do. So I would say from that background, no. But also from the construction standpoint is work is not getting cheaper, right? And so that would be probably more of my urgency from my background is to say, listen, we just keep seeing it. And I would have thought we would have held down after COVID. I mean, we saw mass escalation during COVID. Everybody kept saying, well, once production gets up and running, once these things happen, we're just going to see this curve start to come down. We have yet to see that. And then we also know there's other things at play, that's tariffs and all that other stuff that's out there. How much that plays in, I don't know, but I don't see it as evidence that work's going to get cheaper. So that's really my side of being able to answer that question is I see more of the urgency in that. Being from the cost escalation side of it, not necessarily the safety. Now, if we could bring in some other experts that definitely have that more of a background that probably answer that much better than we on the safety side.
I've heard people talk about drainage problem. Is there a...
Yeah, so there's drainage and elevation problems out there. And again, it's kind of one of those things too, when I look at a project like this, first thing we'd ask ourselves is, does it all have to be done at once, right? And is there a way to break this up? And I think that's probably been the biggest driver of grabbing this all at one piece is that, what are the benefits of piecemealing this? Is there a way to segment it? And I think the drainage and the grading issues is what really prohibits us from segmenting it, saying, listen, we're going to grab this side first, and then we're going to go over here and redo this. Because that's also like, from the FAA standpoint, they don't want to pay for asphalt replacement. Like, they love the idea that we have a good ramp. We're just going to, like, if it got to that point where it's just kind of hitting into life, they'd love to just do a mill and overlay and call it good. That's from their standpoint, that they don't want to spend any more money than they have to either. And so replacement's always last option. And with this, because of the grading and drainage issues, that's why it's always been classified as a replacement, is we got to get that asphalt up and start really grading out and getting the right drainage so that we don't just keep seeing the asphalt degrade in a shorter lifespan than when it should. We want to really get our dollar for it.
Go ahead.
And this is the step process for the fuel farm, right? We kind of need to get this out of the way.
I don't necessarily, I mean, I think you could do, I don't think this holds up the fuel farm. There is a area where we're going to pull these tanks out and it is currently covered by asphalt. I wouldn't consider that part of the essential GA ramp area. It's just, it's kind of like when you look out there and you walk the edge of the asphalt, it was paved all the way up to the fence, paved all the way up to a certain point. That's really not usable ramp space and stuff like that. So if we pull those tanks and we don't pave back to that, I don't think you lose much. I think it's nice to gain that, like to have that. But I don't think the two projects are married. Like, we can go do a fuel farm and do what we need to do and not do the GA ramp. And I think also the GA ramp can be done and we get the fuel farm done separately. I don't think it's nice to time them perfectly, but I don't think it's a marriage with those two projects.
So I'm sure you've thought about this, but I need to know. We're not going to pave over those tanks and then pull them out next year? Tear up the concrete or the asphalt, pull them out.
We haven't delineated that in the project documents, but my intent was to build, coordinate and segment that off so that we don't impact new asphalt.
So if we do, we're gonna have to take asphalt up to remove those tanks.
We are.
And we can just leave that part of it to re-asphalt that next year, or you are not going to do the asphalt back on this?
The plan was that we would re-asphalt over those tanks after they're done, just because of keeping it clean. It's
Right.
just,
No, I like that. I just don't like the idea of doing it twice.
yeah, and really that's where it came into build coordination, because it's really tough going to figure out with the grading plan and everything that's been laid out where exactly those lines fall. You know, in a perfect world, I'd have those tanks already pulled out and then we'd be doing this project, but everything keeps just stacking up and there's not much option.
I guess I think my last question. What's the life expectancy of what we would do here? Is that a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year life expectancy of that pavement job? Do you have a feel for that?
Off the top of my head, I believe that we should expect 20 years plus out there. You know, those are the things that come into play, like us doing a really great job of doing sub-base material and appropriate testing and compaction and all that stuff goes into it, making sure that during this project, we have really good quality control and quality assurances that the asphalt and batches are already really good and it's been applied really great. And so we do all those things. We guarantee that we have the best product, right? Mm-hmm. And then from then on, it's the stewardship of maintaining that asphalt, right? Making sure that we are staying within the 3 to 4 years for coating. Cracks show up, we seal those cracks immediately. We make sure that when we're doing snow removal, we're getting all that stuff off. And then, you know, this isn't like a highway project where there's variables we can't control. That's one of the things I'd like to do is get where we're with the fuel farm, where our fuel delivery trucks are not on the ramp. And so we're keeping it to light vehicles and aircraft. And I think doing all those things, that's how you really extend that out to a 25 plus year life expectancy on asphalt. But those have to be done, and we have to do the follow-up commitments to make sure it does continue that length.
I think that was my last.
The only comment I want to make sure that I make, and I made it a couple of times, is we really, like you said, if you could go back 10 years and start collecting these leases more consistently, we could have paid for this via that lease money. So moving forward, I really think we need to be collecting those leases. And that way, when these projects come up on either airport, that we have those funds available and not trying to figure out where we're going to pull them from. So I'm going to keep pushing that, you know, I'll talk to Vicki again about those ground leases. So that's my only comment I want to make.
I agree with that, but I think that we're going to, in the near future, be discussing some FBO and some other leases, and we can possibly integrate all of that and make it the same for both airports and get policy written and stick with it.
I agree with the commissioners. I think we need to be in the driver's seat, leading how we want to manage all of our assets in Rio Blanco County. And I think a lot of times what happens is we let off and then things like this creep up, and then we end up having to write the check for it. I think we know what we need to do, and I agree with you. Commissioner O'Hara.
I do think that we need to move forward with this. The struggle is where to come up with the 459. Eric, if I understand you correctly, if we transfer funds and pay ourselves back next year, that sets us back with some other projects.
Yeah, so we have, coming up, we have, some seal coats and asphalt maintenance at both airports. We have, some master planning coming up. It's tough to know those funds, but one of the things that we do know is that the bill funding that we receive, so that 545,000 is split between the two airports, that expires next year. So we won't see that in 2027. And so, what we'd have, if we do decide to do that payback, it could shift some of those projects a year, if not 2 years, because, right, we take and we bank that money, those entitlements, to then pay for these projects. And so that means that amount of money coming in when we lose the bill is smaller. And so the current plan that we put together for the next 5-10 years is based on next year getting that 545,000 and applying to those projects and not paying ourselves back. So we will see an impact on those projects for the two airports.
So that being said, I'm not in favor of paying ourselves back next year. I want to get the money.
Agree. And just like Eric said, I mean, you prolong the life of those things if you keep that maintenance up. So I think it bites us in the end if we don't. So, okay, I'm sorry. You have told us this so many times and I didn't bring those. And this sheet doesn't show me. So the 459, yeah, that's one.
This one.
So the total number, if we don't ask for ourselves to be paid back, is near that 780, right?
We're just short
459.
So
Are we sure?
all right, let me,
I know you're tired of this. I'm sorry.
so we have 3.4 million
Right,
project.
right.
About 780,000 is non-pay ourselves back. Right?
There you go. 780. That's what I thought.
So then we have about 2.7 million. That is FAA funded. We have 1.9 million currently in the FAA bucket. And so that leaves us about a little under $800,000 that we would be funding for this project that in viewpoint could be refunded back to us from the FAA. However, next year we only have 545 that's going to come in. And so we're looking at basically covering $800,000 of this project that could be FAA funded if we don't pay ourselves. So I think I know it's really complicated.
So I just want to make sure, sorry. Because in my head, I had that we needed to find the bucket of money for the 459. That's what the bucket of money we're looking at. And where in our budget are we going to pull that from?
But if we're not going to pay ourselves back next year for this, we have to come up with the 800.
Oh, okay.
We are coming up with 800.
Yeah. Okay.
And we just, at that point, we say, bygones, the county covered it. We wanted to move ahead with our project if we don't pay ourselves back.
And the LATCF funds, that you know of this 1.1 million hasn't been designated that's left, because we have used some of it for projects.
Yeah, what I understand and what when I was going back and forth with Lisa is that we have, that 1.182 left in LATCF that has not been allocated to any projects that we can utilize.
Other than the two bridges, 17 and 5, is we were counting on using some of that for that, but it really, we can use this out of LATTF, and if we decide to go forward with those bridges, we can do a supplemental and use some CCITF because that's capital. Or we can use CCITF for this and say this, but we need to get that LACTF spent.
Right, that's what I was thinking
Sure.
firsthand was that. And CCITF, I'd like to just sit as long as we can. I know we have those bridges to do, but that's collecting interest for us. So I don't really want to. I mean, we're getting down there anyway with it being 22 million.
So Lisa, is my synopsis of that correct? We could just use the LACTF and then if we need to move forward with the bridges, we can do a supplemental and use some additional CCITF money.
Yes, I believe that's correct. And my opinion is you should use that LATCF money too, just because it's more restricted and has more regulatory burden on you for reporting and keeping track of it over time.
So are you guys?
I am. And so I'm just looking at if we used the 780,000 out of that, it would leave us 402,000 in LATCF funds.
Yes.
And so just depending on what our bridges do, what we would have to do otherwise. So I'm fine with moving forward with it and with the understanding we would take it out of LATCF.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion. Are we ready to do that? I'm gonna make a motion that we move forward with the project and we use LACTF money and the exact numbers Eric will have to come up with, but it's roughly 800,000.
We have a
I don't
contingency.
make that. We only need the four, we already, because we had the 3 million in there. So we only need to use 459,000 from the
Okay,
LATCF.
so
No.
the number would be, LACTF would be $459,297.01. Don't forget the 1 cent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll second it with some more conversation.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. You have more questions.
Because this is without any contingency.
This is without contingency, so.
So we have
If-
to understand that.
So one of the things, I want to go to the FAA first, cover contingency. They do have buckets. And so I talked with the FAA about that. And so I did not want us approving more than what the actual project is. And then that way we keep a good fight, try them coming to the table every time because they have their own contingency funds.
Right.
And I did ask for that on this round and they said they didn't, and they were gonna work with us if we were able to cover the contingency.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate that and you keeping on top of that.
Good job.
Thanks, Eric. Sean, will you please call the roll?
Overton,
Aye.
O'Hairn.
Aye.
Richfield. Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to line item H.
Okay, so are we gonna have to transfer money?
This is transferring and finishing up the paperwork for transferring the entitlements for this project. This is this grouping entitlements up into one bucket so that we can fund the project with the 1.9. This is the FAA agreement.
Okay, so Madam Chair, I move to approve the transfer, if I get this worded right. Okay, I'll read it instead of trying to make my own. I move to approve a 4VO EEO AIP transfer agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration for the 2025 Rio Blanco County Meeker Airport GA ramp construction project.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions, any comments?
just a comment, that 4VO is Mike saying Meeker Airport.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
4 Victor Oscar is Rangeley Airport. And the Echo Oscar is the Meeker Airport. So you're saying we're transferring with 4 Victor Oscar from Rangeley to Echo Oscar to the Meeker Airport with FAA designations.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense than reading it this way, just for the record.
All right.
No, you're good. Thank you for the clarification.
John, will you please call the roll?
O'Haron.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Scritchfield.
And if we could, in the minutes, make it clear that Rangeley to Meeker, so it's not 4V, whatever.
I'm glad that was clarified, so I did not know what that was.
Okay, thank you.
That's good.
Motion passes. Moving on to line item I.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to award of a contract for the 2025 Rio Blanco County Meeker Museum Roof Replacement Project to Arapahoe Roofing and Sheet Metal, Inc. in the amount of $64,234 and authorize the chair to sign all associated documents.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
So we had requested in our capital improvement project budgeting last year to replace, it's actually the Garrison building, but it's hard to keep that, like when I say Garrison, then everybody gets confused that it's that grouping of buildings with the museum. So it's the Garrison building, which is the building located just to the east of the main Meeker Museum building. We had them bid synthetic shake that has a good 25-year lifespan on it. We requested 85,000 in budget last year, and the board approved that, and so we received 3 bids, and this is the low bid for the project.
I appreciate the fact that you're doing synthetic and making it look authentic, but yet keeping the fire rating down and stuff. I think that's important to a lot of people.
I think it's gonna look really nice.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you, Eric. John, will you please call the roll?
Scritchfield.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
O'Haron.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to line item J.
Madam Chair, I would move submitting a letter for the Meeker Lions Club to serve alcohol on Rio Blanco County property for the following dates, times, and events. So the first one being range call, ranch rodeo, and motocross event Friday, July 4th from 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the fairgrounds, grandstands and area. And for the CPRA rodeo, Saturday, July 5th, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the fairgrounds, grandstand and arena. And the third one, range call concert and barn dance, Saturday, July 5th, from 5 in the evening till midnight at the Rio Blanco County Fairgrounds, Old Ball Field, and Indoor Arena. And the last one being the CPRA Rodeo, Sunday, July 6th, from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Fairgrounds and Arena, the Fairgrounds grandstands and arena. All in Meeker.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from either of you?
No.
Sean, will you please call the roll?
O'Haron.
Aye.
Scritchfield.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Moving on to line item K.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion to ratify a letter to the Colorado Department of Health and Environment Air Quality Control Commission formally requesting party status for the upcoming rulemaking hearing regarding Regulation 31.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments on this one? Reese, will you update us on this one, please?
Yeah, no problem. I have not heard anything yet. Kirby informed me that that is typical. It sounds like it could take a week or two to see if our plea to file it or request as a party is accepted. Just keep in mind they may refuse that since it is past the deadline, but being we were between landfill directors, we utilize that as reasoning to hopefully be accepted. So as soon as I find out, I will certainly let you folks know. Thad and myself are points of contact on this issue from the division. Obviously that could change and we could request for that to change if we are accepted with the division and keep it to one person or multiple people. But stay tuned and we'll wait and see if they accept our request.
So just real quickly, Reese, a very brief scenario of what Regulation 31 is, just so public understands the value of it here, the lack of value. Sorry. And why we want to be a commenter or a party.
Correct. And I do, admittedly, I have limited knowledge, but some of the info that was sent to us from other individuals, it seems like maybe as far as emissions go relative to this rulemaking, maybe Rio Blanco County at this point in time is not affected by it, but measurement of emissions from a landfill could certainly change over time as well. So there is a possibility that maybe with our emissions, we could be impacted by this rulemaking. And my understanding that is the main premise of this regulation is to further regulate the amount of emissions coming from landfills in the state of Colorado, and then to implement incredibly costly mitigation strategies to better control that. I think where it most directly would impact Rio Blanco County is it sounds like there are very direct rules that require you to manage covering waste maybe more restricted, I guess. I'm not a landfill expert clearly here. So it sounds like maybe the medium at which you would cover your waste in the landfill would be very driven and directed by the state. The words compost or particular soil texture was used in some of the emails that I read. So I hope that's helpful. But again, I apologize for my limited knowledge on this topic.
All right. I may be able to help a little bit. The covering they're talking about, we cover our dump now, but the reason we cover it is to keep trash from blowing around.
Right.
Covering they're talking about is to capture the emissions coming out of the ground and take care of them. And the other thing is we should pay attention to this because one of the reasons that Rio Blanco County may not be involved in it right now is because of the tonnage or the size of the landfill. We could easily move up and then all of a sudden this would impact us terribly. So I think that we should help.
Or they could reduce their size.
Right.
To
That'll be
include
the
us.
next
So,
thing is they say, oh, now that we have all of these in effect, we're going to reduce it down to something that includes us.
no, I appreciate you staying on that, Reese, and getting us in there. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. It was pretty helter-skelter, so I scurried as fast as I could. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Will you please call the roll?
Overton,
Aye.
O'Haron,
Aye.
Scritchfield.
Aye.
Moving on to line item 4, resolutions. We removed line item A, so we will move on to line item B.
See, my turn. I think so. Madam Chair, I would move resolution 2025-17, a resolution to the Board of County Commissioners of Rio Blanco County, Colorado, authorizing participation in the litigation against Colorado Air Quality Control Commission.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second.
Just a note, that should be resolution number 16 because we did remove 16
Yes,
from.
sorry.
All good.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you caught that.
Friendly amendment.
Any discussion on this one?
No.
John, will you please call the roll?
Scritchfield. Aye. O'Haron.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Motion passes. We do not have any public hearings. Moving on to other business, county commissioner updates.
Like you start or?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I attended the Yampa Green White Basin Roundtable. I was involved in the public work interviews to select a new public works director. I met with Vicky and staff regarding a lot of that. I attended a Unified Wolf Coalition meeting every Monday. The Produced Water Consortium is going to have a meeting in Rifle the first part of June. And I am going to present at that consortium and try and explain to them how they are basically shooting themselves in the foot by not letting operators build new water treatment facilities at the locations, in which would increase truck traffic and all kinds of things that they are against, because it is a DI community. And without getting into that a lot, that is the main concern that I have, is the DI community, because not a lot of people live down there. So that's Reese and I are working on that, and we're going to do a presentation at that. I also went to the PAC meeting, the White River PAC meeting, for the final presentation of the water return flow in the White River. And they did a really good job with that. People should definitely look at that presentation and get the facts, because you should know what you're doing when you put a call on the river, or you are going to impact the river, because that return flow will impact everybody downriver on river flows later in the year. So Rangeley could really be in trouble if we don't pay attention and keep this return flow going. That's all I have.
Thank you. So, hopefully attended the final Colorado Wild Horse Work Group meeting. And I feel like the success there that came out of 18 months worth of meetings is that I believe in the final report, it will note that BLM will still need to remove excess horses. No matter how much darting we do, there will still be too many horses being produced. So we are going to have to remove horses. And first of all, that I don't know that they'll say it quite this clearly, like I would like them to, because remember, this is all a work group that everybody has to come to consensus on. But we will get them down to AML, to the appropriate management level. Then we start fertility control, and we still need to remove horses. The other thing is the bill actually directed this committee to really look at the state creating a preserve, another money sink for wild horses. And I believe we were successful in getting that direction headed off, I guess is the way I would say it. They are going to use the term preserve, but there's going to be a definition of the word preserve that in the state will not own any horses. So it's not going to be lifelong, because that's what preserves are, is typically you leave them there from now on until they die of old age. So my conversation, and I think it'll end up in the report, I've got to finish reviewing it today and tomorrow, but I think it is going to be no more than like a year to 3 years is as long as any horse can stay in this preserve, and that the state will not own them. And then they will have to go back to whoever's ownership they were. Well, they'll stay in ownership, but it's up to them to take care of them. So if it's BLM then takes them to their long-term holding. If it's the tribes, the tribe has to take the horses back and do whatever the tribe will do with the horses. The question is the horses that there's about, I heard two different numbers, between 1,000 and 2,500 horses in the San Luis Valley that they're just feral horses, and the numbers just keep growing. So that's another piece of them. So hopefully that's the end of the horse conversation for now. Had multiple staff meetings, attended the stock growers banquet, which was very nice last weekend, not this one, but last weekend. Also joined Doug on the Wolf Coalition meeting. And then I spent 2 full days in Washington, D.C. with Club 20. We did have the chance to talk to Senator Bennett, Congressman Nagoose, and Hurd. We did also talk with folks in the Department of Ag. The agency folks, we really did not get the higher level people like we typically would, which was really unfortunate. But I think the fact that we were there the weekend, the couple days before Memorial Weekend, had something to do with that, because we had a lot of higher level folks that canceled on us. But U.S. Forest Service, we talked to BLM, good presentation from the Mining Association, and then from Public Lands Council. So we did talk significantly about the need for a BLM director and for maybe a little different direction with Colorado's BLM that would focus on the president's priorities. So that was a lot of our focus, and a lot of forestry. I will say we also talked a lot about forestry. And the one thing I want to say, U.S. Forest Service was very confident that they will have, depending on how bad the fire season is, but that their fire people, they will have all their fire people in place. The cuts, let's see, because the way it turned out, they had to bring those people or had to allow them to come back. But all of the red card people, there's a lot of red card people in BLM too that help fight those fires. So everybody's pretty confident that unless it's just a crazy wild season, they'll be good. The other thing, and Jennifer, you may touch on this, but what we heard while we were back there, because they had spent over 36 hours in session on the budget in the House side. But the good news on the Medicare is, as you had suggested, while there's cuts to Medicaid, sorry, thank you. The able-bodied people have to work. They have to be U.S. citizens. If a state chooses not to do U.S. citizens, the feds will only pay 80% instead of 90%. So they do allow it, but it'll cost them more. And let's see, citizens, able-bodied. What was the third one? You had suggested it. I'm like going, man, they must have been listening to Jennifer. What's the third one? Had to work, had to be a citizen. I'm drawing like, sorry. It's in my notes. I'll look at it while you look at yours because it's in my notes. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Few updates for me. I received a call from Congressman Hurd on Friday that CNCC had submitted an application with his office to do some updates to the airport in Rangeley. And it is one of his top priorities in for appropriations in the House. So he just wanted to let us know. And he asked me specifically to make sure I mention it to both of you that he is making that a top priority, and hopefully we'll get it through appropriations, but no guarantees. I did talk to him briefly about Medicaid and supporting, the direction that they are going right now with some of those cuts, so to speak, and putting some of those policies into place as far as able-bodied and U.S. citizens, requiring U.S. citizens. Oh, the Medicaid expansion is probably what they were talking about. They're not going to move forward with that from what I was reading on the Medicaid expansion. I still think that they need to be looking at that. That's just my opinion. It would help cut some of those costs that we're seeing, since Colorado is $1.2 million in deficit with just Medicaid alone. So
The transgender piece.
Oh,
Is they're not gonna pay for the transgender surgery.
transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That was the third one.
I knew there was a third.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Also abortion.
Didn't hear any of that conversation.
Yeah.
Was thinking that's what I heard.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't
brought
know
that
that I
up.
have.
We'll reread that again, because I do kind of remember reading something about the abortion piece, but I I attended the WIR conference with NACO. I do need to backtrack a little bit. Last time we met, I was a little taken aback by the nuclear summit and said, I don't know why I was there, but now it actually is all coming together, because a lot of this conference was about energy. U.S. Forest Service and energy were the two main topics. And so being at that summit really helped me in some of the conversations that were in some of these sessions about, transmission lines and the grid. And I didn't realize how complex our energy system is, and all the different facets. And so I was actually invited to what they're calling energizing counties. And it was a smaller group of people talking about different projects that are out there, particularly solar farms and wind farms. And a gentleman actually gave, I couldn't believe word for word what we went through when we had our hearing for the solar farm with NextEra, and some of the questions and concerns that they had. I just was listening. I was like, oh my gosh, are you sure you don't live in Rio Blanco County? That is exactly, minus the wind farm, because they also had a wind farm attached to theirs, but they had NextEra as their company that was putting the solar farm and wind farm in. One of the pieces that he was very concerned with was that selling component. And I know we had that conversation, and he said that they didn't get that across the finish line in their contract with them, that they are already looking at selling it, and they really haven't even done much on the project. So made that connection with him. And so if it comes up again, I think, and across the United States, it's the same conversation, in counties sharing with one another these stories, and then what is the outcome? What's the future of this? What does this look like? So very interesting conversation. I was glad that I went to it. And because at first I was like, I don't know if I need to be there, but I was very glad that I ended up going. They talked about geothermal. There is a site. They're actually going to be doing two different sites in the state of Utah, in Milford. And they are, I don't remember how far they're going down. They're going further than what our fracking does, and getting pretty close to the core is kind of what I was understanding. And then they did say that they will have to use water to shoot down in there, but once it goes in, and I know way better than I do, then it's kind of recycling. So yes, it does use a lot of water at the beginning, but they are expecting to be producing 400 gigawatts by site 2. Right now they have 33, if I remember correctly, the numbers, gigawatts just in this one site. So they are looking at other locations. They actually had a map up that where geothermal is and where potentially we could have geothermal sites. and Rio Blanco was a hot spot for that. So I just found it interesting, and it's, we do have some orphaned fracking wells. So could we look at those and going down a little bit further with those? I don't know. And that was another conversation that was had with that. So it was a really good conference, and I walked away with a lot of information, more so, and again, on energy. So a lot of it's coming together for me between nuclear, geothermal, and it just all is starting to make sense. They also talked about selling land. BLM did a presentation on they've chosen sites to sell off land, BLM land. And so I don't think they didn't have a map of who was chosen, or they had the acres, and I don't remember how many acres they've already chosen. But I did text Bill Mills and ask him if Rio Blanco, and he said not that he is aware of. Have we had any sites for selling off land? So met with constituents as well as staff. I attended a NACO rural meeting, and my last meeting that I had was with John Raby, Doug Vilsack, and Mike Ned over the BLM MOU. And out of that conversation, I did learn that, and this is really interesting, that BLM can't start their permitting process until the state does their permitting process or approves their permits. So we have to wait. It's kind of vice versa. And so talk to all three of them about the concerns about that, and why is that backwards when it's federal lands and not state lands. And so I know Doug said that he was going to be talking to ECMC and having a meeting with them. I suggested that he include operators that are having these issues 2 to 3 years and bringing them in, not just these little side conversations. I think that we need to be bringing in more people into those conversations, including producers, operators. Yes. And so I did talk to I talked to a Utah County commissioner about that issue, and his suggestion to me was getting a hold of somebody at the presidential level administration to let them know that that's what's going on in the state of Colorado, and how can we get that reversed so that it's BLM first before it's state.
Yeah, and I think that's strictly because of that MOU. I don't think it's anywhere else. Because but I did communicate, we could never connect, but I did communicate with QB, and they didn't give me that impression that the state has to approve first. So we need to dig into, and I think it's just that MOU that's trying to drive that, or individuals.
Okay. And part of my conversation was in that MOU, because we had that conversation with QB, is flipping it so that it's really mainly BLM in that table before it's ECMC. Because right now it's ECMC and CDPHE on. And again, I get that there's that water piece, which you're working on, but they need to get out of the way and just let us get some permitting done and let the federal government do that. So that was that conversation. So other than that, I don't have anything else. All right. We are adjourned at 11:34.